ग्लोबल स्किल डेवलपमेंट मिशन में आपका स्वागत है।
In the previous exercise, we learned about organizing our information to help us bring order to what would otherwise be chaos. And we're going to continue on that theme of bringing order to chaos in this exercise with a look at alignments. So aligning your objects and also aligning text inside your layouts. And we want to use alignment to our advantage. That's really the bottom line. So what I'm looking at here is what we had at the end of the previous lesson. All I've done here is I've simply widened the page or the actual document for the layout. That's all I've done here, just to give us a little bit of extra space. And as you can see, everything inside this layout is center aligned, okay? Now that's fine. A center alignment can make layouts look elegant. Think of things like wedding invitations or perhaps even elegant greeting cards or things like this. They can look elegant, but they can also look very amateurish as well, center-aligned layouts, that is, because all we would do is we would simply grab all of the content and align it to the center of the page, vertically, of course, and that's it. That's all there is to it. So be careful with that and use your center aligned sparingly. I certainly try to use it sparingly. So what we can do is we can start to create some more visual interest by applying some different alignments inside of our layout. However, you don't want to go too crazy. If I move myself over to the next example here inside this example, we have all the same information, so I haven't changed anything. I haven't changed the order of the information either. All I've done is changed some alignments. And unfortunately, we have so many alignments going on inside this layout that we're back into the realm of chaos. We've sort of opened Pandora's box and we're back into sort of the madness here. Nothing here really makes sense. It looks as if everything's just been kind of arbitrarily placed on the page. Again, think of that analogy of dumping puzzle pieces out and just kind of shifting them around inside the document until they look good. And that's what we have going on here. Nothing here makes sense. And, one of the golden rules in graphic design is that nothing inside your layout should ever be placed arbitrarily. Everything should be connected to something else, okay? So, in the next example, all I've done is I've taken all of the information that we have inside the layout and I simply left aligned it. That's all I did. Very, very simple. What I've done here is I found a strong line, a vertical line running right down the left-hand side of the page. You could grab a ruler or draw with your eye an invisible line running right down the left-hand side of the page, and that creates strength inside the layout. And it simultaneously brings order to the chaos. If I hadn't mentioned order at all in this entire course, you would know intuitively that these techniques are bringing order and structure to what would otherwise be a mess, right? Now, a strong left alignment is fantastic. We can also go with the opposite, a strong right alignment, something like this. So left and right alignments really bring a lot of strength to the layout. A right alignment also appears more sophisticated, doesn't it? Let me center this a little bit more on screen. There we go. It appears more sophisticated. It can also appear more technical as well. And what's interesting is once we've established a strong line somewhere inside the layout, we can start having a little bit of fun and we can start applying a little bit of creativity. In this fifth example, I've left aligned everything, and then I took all of the objects and I simply shifted them over towards the right-hand side of the document like this, again, creating visual interest. So I've started to get a little bit creative here, nothing too wild, nothing too fancy, but just some simple changes, some simple adjustments. And by the way, as a side note, I know that I'm using very basic text. There's no drop shadows, there's no embosses, there's none of that stuff that you would see inside of a Transformers movie, which we discussed earlier. I'm purposefully keeping this very, very simple to really try to hammer home the points for you. So here we have a left alignment. We're getting a little bit creative by moving things over towards the right-hand side of the page, creating visual interest, okay? Now, we could get even more visually interesting by perhaps using two strong lines, a strong left line and a strong right line. So we can continue getting creative here. I get a little bit weary about things like this because I don't want to start creating too many strong lines inside my layout. However, that being said, we now are also controlling the reader's eye. We're controlling the viewer's eye by leading the eye from the top left corner down to the bottom right corner. So odds are, when I first pulled this up on screen, you scanned here, then down to here, then possibly your eye bounced back and forth a few times before you actually read the information. Okay. The other thing that I did, by the way, is I've applied what we learned in the previous exercise, and I reorganized some of the information just a little bit. I put the most important information up at the top and the least important information down at the bottom. Okay? All right, so I hope this is working for you. Now, everything that we've talked about so far applies to laying out objects inside of a document. We can also apply a lot of what we've learned so far to text. And there are a variety of methods for aligning text. Here what we have is a left-aligned paragraph. And there's nothing wrong with it. It looks fairly straightforward. It looks pretty basic, pretty simple. We'd see this in perhaps a novel or a magazine layout or something like that. Sometimes left alignments are also referred to as ragged right alignments because the right-hand side of the paragraph appears jagged or ragged. But that creates a little bit of confusion because there's also right-hand alignment or right-aligned text, which looks like this, of course. And sometimes this alignment is referred to as ragged left aligned text. You may have heard of that before. But again, it creates a little bit of confusion. I think most people these days just call it left aligned text or right aligned text. As we discussed with the layout objects, right-aligned text creates visual interest. It looks a little bit more sophisticated, perhaps a little bit more technical. And everything that I'm talking about here could apply to a single line of text, a headline perhaps, or a paragraph of text. Now, of course, we also have the good old center-aligned text, which would look like this. And once again, everything that I mentioned earlier about center alignment applies to a paragraph of text as well. This looks elegant, but at the same time, it could look a little bit amateurish as well, so be careful with that. Now, in addition to left, right, and center-aligned text, we also have some justified text or justification that you may want to make use of. Now, let me pan over here to the next example. This is left justified text. And you've probably heard of the term before, but do you know exactly what it is? Do you know how it functions? Well, how left justified text works is all of the lines of text inside the paragraph are going to span from the left-hand side of the paragraph all the way over to the right-hand side of the paragraph, creating a visual rectangle or a visual box inside the layout, except for the last line of text. It's called left justified text because all of the text is justified except for the last line, which is left aligned. Okay? And this can look pretty sophisticated. It can look pretty technical as well. It's a great way to lay out documents, magazines, technical documents, things like that. Okay, I see it a lot in my travels. We also have right justified text, exactly the same as left justified text. So the text inside the paragraph, all of the lines are spanning from the left all the way over to the right, except for the last line of text, which is right aligned. Okay, I don't use this one very often, but I know that, of course, it is an option inside my various applications that I use. And then, of course, we also have center justified text. Exactly the same as before. Text is spanning from the left all the way over to the right, except for the last line of text, which is center aligned. Okay? Again, something like this could look fairly sophisticated or technical, but also adding in a little bit of elegance as well. Once again, I got to remind you, I'm not getting into making this look more fancy with really elegant fonts or, getting into kerning and tracking and all that crazy stuff. This is just plain vanilla text to really hammer home what we're talking about here. Okay? All right. Now, next, we have what's referred to as fully justified text. And in the case of fully justified text, what we have is all of the lines of text inside the paragraph spanning, as before, from the left to the right. Now, what happens with the last line, though, is he also spans from the left all the way over to the right. So something like this is, again, something that I know is possible inside my various applications. I can't tell you the last time when I actually used it, though, because this, to me, looks It looks pretty crummy. All the gaps of white space in here. It doesn't look sophisticated. It doesn't look technical. To me, it looks like chaos. It looks like mess. So I don't want to bother using it. But of course, you're certainly welcome to make use of it. So as a recap, let's go back to the analogy of dumping puzzle pieces out onto your kitchen table. And again, what most people will do is they'll say something like, oh, my brother-in-law is an artist. We'll get him to do the graphic designer. We'll get him to lay out the web page. Or my wife loves doing interior design. We'll get her to design the brochure. And what winds up happening is people wind up pushing puzzle pieces around inside the layout until they get something that looks kind of nice. And honestly, they're just flying blind. They're just taking these various objects and going, how about that? How does that look? And maybe I'll kind of position that. Hey, that looks pretty nice, and I'll move this down here with no real rhyme or reason as to why they're moving these objects around in the way that they are. Okay? So if I move over to the next example that I have here, this example here is now applying what we've learned inside this exercise, finding a strong line and sticking with it. In this particular example, there's a few strong lines that are working for us. There's the strong line running down the left-hand side of the layout. Again, you could draw an imaginary line running right down the left-hand side of my document here. There's another strong line running across the top of the document as well. And then there's a third, a more minor strong line running right across the bottom edge of this orange rectangle, which is lining up with the bottom edge of this green box. Okay? So finding those strong lines and sticking with it. All right. The last example that I have here for you takes into account what we learned in the last two exercises. So the previous exercise and this exercise. Finding strong lines and sticking with them, and also organizing the information in a manner that makes sense. Finding the information and structuring it from most important to least important. And I know I'm using colored boxes here, but again, it's just for simplification. Every element inside of our layout should have a visual connection with something else inside the layout. So rather than just arbitrarily laying out your objects, we now know that we can structure them in an intelligent and in a logical order, and we can also use alignment to eliminate the chaos and bring visual interest to our layouts.